6 blinking numbers changed my life. I told no one, not my son, not my daughter, not my brother. In the quiet kitchen, the ticket lay under a yellow lamp, my hands shaking while the refrigerator hummed and the wall clock ticked like a tiny hammer. 62 million before taxes, more than I will ever need, but I did not spend a dollar. First, I would learn the truth. If they believed I was empty, who would still stand beside me? If they smelled wealth, who would sprint? I thought of Mark's lectures, Emily's soft delays, Robert's endless emergencies, and the night Aunt Martha pressed 200 into my palm with trembling kindness. Tonight I chose silence and a test. I searched for a way to hide the claim, a trust with no name but mine, a door that locked from the inside. Then I folded the ticket once, slid it into an envelope, and wrote a single line on a scrap of paper. By the time the sun set on this house, the people who loved my wallet would meet my silence. My breath steadied. The humming, the ticking, the low thud in my chest formed a metronome for resolve. The phone lay face down, waiting for tomorrow. Before this night ends, the masks come off. I would ask for little, just 7,000 to keep the roof, and listen for who offered love and who offered excuses tonight. Before we go further, tap subscribe and tell us where you are watching from. If you had to choose between love and leverage, which one has truly shown up in your life? Have you ever tested the loyalty of those closest to you when everything was on the line? Stay with me, because this story is not about revenge or spite. It is about a clean lesson in boundaries, in proof that cannot be twisted, and in peace that cannot be stolen. I am Henry Lawson, 58, born under winter skies in a small Ohio town where you learn early that money fixes roofs, but not hearts. I live alone now in the modest house Ellen and I bought when the kids were small, a one-story with creaking floors and a porch that holds the last of her laughter. The kitchen keeps our history in quiet details. A photo strip stuck to the fridge from a county fair, a ceramic ring dish by the sink where she used to set her wedding band while rinsing apples. I keep the lights low in the evenings, let the coffee drip slow, and listen to the wall clock answer the refrigerator's hum like two steady lungs. My family taught me young that money is not love, it is leverage. Mark learned the phrase seed money and never unlearned it. He called one spring night and said 5,000 would bridge him to launch, and I wired it before sunrise. He thanked me with speed and never mentioned repayment, except to say my belief helped him convince others. Emily is softer, careful with tone, the one who still sends photos of her kids on birthdays. When she and Paul found a condo, I covered the closing costs so their start would feel possible. Her calls thinned as their cabinets filled. Robert is my younger brother and a veteran of half promises. If there were medals for borrowing, he would polish them on Sundays. I paid repair bills that were emergencies, covered tabs that were accidents, and listened to lectures about how family helps family, delivered by the man whose hand was always out. He said I had more, that I should be grateful I could help. Gratitude became a leash. I wore it so long, I forgot where the clasp dug into skin. You forgive because forgiveness is cheap up front. The bill comes due when you finally ask a favor and the room goes quiet. When Ellen got sick, the stories put on their best clothes. I called my children, and I called Robert from this table where the grain is worn smooth under my hands. Mark was busy saving his payroll. Emily was juggling the kids and delays. Robert counseled me to refinance and be practical. The only person who showed up was Aunt Martha, my father's sister, who lives on a pension and carries groceries home by bus. She pressed $200 into my palm like a secret and whispered that she wished it were more. I tucked the old withdrawal slip from Ellen's treatment year into a drawer and told myself I would not forget who stood up. Years passed, and I trained myself not to expect what history never delivered. Then 6 blinking numbers lit the screen above this table and pushed the past into the present. $62 million. After taxes, still more than I could say out loud without losing my breath. I held the ticket under the lamp and felt two lives pulling at me. The boy who wanted to run outside and shout that we were finally free, and the man who knew that a loud miracle in the wrong room is bait. I did not call anyone. I poured a small bourbon I did not finish and let the ice count the seconds. By morning, I had searched every careful phrase for staying hidden. Blind trust, anonymity, trustees who sign so you do not have to. I wrote down the name Linda Myers and rode an elevator that smelled like lemon polish to a floor where the carpet softened every footstep. Linda shook my hand with the practiced calm of someone who has seen fortune arrive like a storm. "What do you want this money to do for you?" she asked. I told her I wanted it to buy me time, and I wanted it to buy me truth. She mapped the path. Trust documents, identity shielded, clean custody of the claim. Back home, the house looked the same and completely changed. The streetlight buzzed through thin curtains and laid a pale ladder across the floorboards. I opened the drawer, set the lottery slip beside the old withdrawal slip, the photo strip, and the ring dish, and felt the shape of what I wanted. I wanted boundaries that did not need permission. I wanted the quiet that follows a right decision. I wanted proof. Announce a fortune, and I become a wallet. Announce a need, and I meet the truth. Silence protects. Proof anchors. Those words settled like anchors dropped into deep water, and the ripples calmed my chest. So I decided I would learn the truth. Before I let money change a single thing, I could not change back. I would claim the prize through the trust, but I would tell no one. I would not upgrade a chair or a car or a coffee. Instead, I would ask for what I had given, not a fortune. $7,000 toward a mortgage in trouble, an amount small enough to be possible, large enough to matter. It sits on the edge between pity and partnership. If I announce a fortune, I become a wallet. If I announce a need, I meet the truth. That line deserved ink, so I wrote it at the top of a yellow pad. I needed a way to hold the answers steady. Walter, an old neighbor who wore a badge for years, once told me that memory is polite and inaccurate. He said to write exact words with dates while they are still warm and to keep a copy of anything that matters in a second place. I found the leather notebook Ellen gave me on our 20th anniversary and drew columns for names, dates, and what was said. I charged a small recorder and practiced the buttons with my eyes closed until my thumb could find start and stop by feel. None of this was for court. It was for my sanity when the sweet rewriting began. That evening, I walked room to room and listened to the life inside the house that money cannot buy. The furnace hummed a steady promise. The printer whirred once, a brief throat clear. Far off, a siren thinned into nothing. I sat with my coffee and looked at the peeling paint and felt no shame. Where tells the truth? I looked at the empty chair across from mine and said Ellen's name. She would have told me to keep the circle small and my word exact. She would have approved of quiet courage, the kind that does not post itself, the kind that keeps notes. I set the ticket back under the lamp, watched the microwave clock blink its unhurried count, and put my finger on the first name I would call. Not my son, not yet. I would start where the wound is shallowest and move toward the bone. I rehearsed the sentence until it fit in my mouth, without decoration. The firm I trusted failed. The bank is pressing. I need $7,000 to hold the house. It is not a fortune. It is a measure. It is the distance between sympathy and sacrifice. If the answer came clean, I would know. If it did not, I would know that too. Before dawn, I checked the papers Linda had drawn up and read the printed words that would keep my name out of headlines and my peace within reach. Identity protected, funds shielded, time granted. I sharpened a pencil and wrote the plan in the notebook so I would not drift. Ask once. Record exactly. Do not argue, plead, or coach. Receive the answer and write it down. If I announce a fortune, I become a wallet. If I announce a need, I meet the truth. Silence protects. Proof anchors. That is how a man who has been used learns where to put his feet. And that is how I walked into the test. I set the rules before I dialed a single number. First, protect the claim. Second, protect the truth. Third, protect my peace. The claim came first. Linda Myers drew the map in simple steps I could follow without leaving fingerprints. File through the trust. Keep my legal name behind a wall of documents. Appoint 2 trustees with no family ties and a fiduciary duty thicker than blood. We sat in her office with a list between us, and I asked dull questions on purpose. If I die, who signs? If I am in the hospital, who decides? If someone waves a court paper, what does the trust demand? Linda answered without drama. The trust owns the claim. You are the beneficiary. You are also disciplined enough to wait. I nodded and did the part that mattered most. I signed the papers and left them alone. The money could wait. The truth could not. Back home, I made the plan as ordinary as a shopping list. Call the people who have called me when their roofs leaked and their pride needed a towel. Use the same words for each one. Ask once. No stories, no cushioning, no bargain. 7,000 to halt foreclosure this week. I wrote that sentence in block letters at the top of a yellow pad, so I would not be tempted to decorate it with apology. Then I underlined the number, 7,000. Big enough to matter, small enough to be doable for each of them. I laid out the tooling like a carpenter. The leather notebook Ellen gave me went on the left side of the table. I drew clean columns for date, time, number dialed, exact words, and the result. The cheap digital recorder sat on the right, its red light winking when I practiced the buttons. Walter, my old neighbor and retired cop, pressed it into my palm and said, "Trust the device more than the story you will be told later. Record the calls," he said, "not to prosecute, to protect your memory." I tested the microphone in the kitchen and again in the living room where the furnace hum could blur a voice. I stood near the window and spoke the line aloud until it fit my breath. I made a bad investment. The bank is moving. I need 7,000 to hold the house. Can you help this week? I timed the silence after the question. I practiced not filling it. Silence is where truth comes up for air. I also practiced the end. Thank you for listening. I will let you go. Goodbye. Short, clean, final. 7 is the hinge, I wrote at the bottom of the page. It turns the door to yes or no without wobble. Too small a number, and I invite pity that costs them nothing. Too large, and I give them a ladder to climb away on. 7 feels like a month of mortgage, a winter of heat, a number a grown child can meet if they want to be counted. It lets me see the difference between intention and action. I checked the calendar and set a window. 1 week to make the calls, 1 week to write the answers. Then stop. No chasing. No second tries. If you do not show up when asked directly, showing up later only reveals that you heard a rumor. Boundaries like these make a man sleep. I taped the window to the fridge so I would face it when I reached for milk. I put my phone on the table and rehearsed the order. Start with the edges, move toward the center. A cousin who borrowed long ago. A niece who calls on holidays. Then the brother. Then the children. It is not punishment. It is triage for my nerves. I will be sharper when I reach the names that hold weight. I wrote small cues under each name. Robert jokes when cornered. Mark lectures when he feels blamed. Emily softens with sympathy that ends in later. The cues are reminders, not traps. Before dinner, Walter stopped by and leaned on the porch rail while the sky went orange. He asked if I was ready, and I told him I had removed every excuse a man could give himself. The money is sealed. The plan is written. The tools are tested. The words are honest. He nodded and said the line he always saves for last. When you ask, let it be plain as a road sign. If they swerve, they meant to. I went back inside and cleared the table. I set the notebook like a ledger that could not be erased. I placed a pen that writes without skipping. I put a glass of water where bourbon once sat and promised my heart a quiet shift. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. The recorder waited. I picked up the phone and felt calm. There is a strange dignity in building a test that does not lie. It keeps me from word games and keeps them from claiming they misunderstood. I do not want to catch anyone. I want to see them. That is the whole of it. The calls will be ordinary, the words plain, the number exact, the deadline real. I will not argue. I will not defend my need. I will not sell my house to protect their image of me. I will ask, they will answer, and the notebook will hold it. Before I dialed, I read the line at the top of the pad one more time. I made a bad investment. The bank is moving. I need $7,000 to hold the house. Can you help this week? Then I looked at the old withdrawal slip from Ellen's treatments and let it anchor me. I am not playing a game. I am measuring love. I pressed record, breathed once, and tapped the first name. The experiment had begun because a decision had been made, and both were mine to keep. I started with Emily because gentleness felt like the shallow end. The recorder's red light blinked, and I read the line I had written without apology. I made a bad investment. The bank is moving. I need $7,000 to hold the house. Can you help this week? Her voice arrived soft and bright, like a door opened only a few inches. Dad, that's awful. I'm so sorry. Let me talk to Paul and see what we can do. Tuition hit us and we just covered a condo repair, maybe a small amount next month. I wrote the time and the words, then left the rest blank. She added, I'll call you tomorrow, which usually means never. I thanked her, ended the call, and said the sentence into the mic so I would not forget the shape of it. We will see. Walter texted one sentence. Stop padding. I placed my palm on the table to steady the urge to explain myself and pressed the next number. Robert answered mid-laugh, as if I had interrupted a story he was telling about himself. Brother, what's good? I read the line again without preface. He let out a low whistle, then a chuckle that slid into advice. That's rough. $7,000. You sure you cannot refinance? Sell the truck. Trim some fat. You know the drill. I said the deadline again. This week. He grew friendly the way a man grows friendly when he wants to end a call. You'll figure it out. You always do. Not even a maybe. I wrote the time and the phrase. You will figure it out. Then I wrote 0. Mark's name sat under my thumb like a splinter. I pressed call and stepped to the window. He answered with startup air in his voice. Dad, I am walking into a meeting. Is this quick? It is quick. I made a bad investment. The bank is moving. I need $7,000 to hold the house. Can you help this week? He exhaled like a coach about to fix a player. Dad, you need a plan. At your age, you cannot gamble like that. I have payroll, a lease, a product launch. 7 is not realistic for me right now. Maybe 2 later. I repeated this week. He said I cannot cover 7 and added call me if it gets dire, as if the word dire were comfort. I wrote his exact phrases and the tone, then the small sound he made when he shifted the phone away. Sharon's number flashed like a porch light I never liked. She answered on ring 2 with a smile I could hear. Henry, what a surprise. I read the line. She let a beat pass long enough to warm the contempt. Well, isn't this something? 7,000. After all those years of you playing the helper, maybe it is time to be practical. Sell the house. Live within your means like the rest of us. I reminded her of the hurricane year and the check I wrote to repair their roof. She clicked her tongue. That was different. Besides, we all sacrificed. I wrote her words, then added one I could not write while she listened. Revision. By late afternoon, the page showed a pattern neat enough to trace with a finger. Soft promise. Deflection. Lecture. Contempt. The only number left on the short list that did not smell like a ledger was Martha's. I had avoided it because love does not need a test, and yet the test needs the whole truth. I pressed call, the recorder blinking. "Henry?" she said, and the room changed temperature. I spoke the line and hated how it sounded in her ear. She did not hesitate. "Oh, sweetheart, I am so sorry. Of course I will help. I do not have 7, but I can bring 3 today. It is almost everything I have, but you need it more." I stared at the window until my eyes found water. "Martha, I cannot take that from you." She made a small sound that quieted the decades. "Family helps family. You told me that when you fixed my porch stairs. Do not argue. Tell me where to meet you." I wrote her words with my hand shaking and added a note the recorder could not capture. "Immediate? Yes." I set the phone on the table and let the silence stand between the calls like a wall. I read each entry aloud to the recorder so I would have the rhythm as well as the words. Then I turned the page and copied the list again. Slower. Emily. "We will see." Robert. "You will figure it out." Mark. "Cannot cover 7." Sharon. "Sell the house." Martha. "I will help today." The kettle hissed. I poured water over tea and watched steam rise. Grief sat down across from me, but it did not talk. It only looked at the list until Clarity took the other chair. Walter came by at dusk and found me lining up the notebook with the edge of the table. He scanned the columns without touching the paper. He pointed once at the dot next to later. "Do not wait for promises with no date," he said. "Let the call end where the sentence ends." I nodded. He tapped the recorder with a knuckle. "Keep proof for your sanity. One day they will say they offered, they tried, they meant to. You will need their exact words more than you need your memory of the feeling." Then he added the sentence I wrote twice. "Stop apologizing." Night pressed against the windows. I sat with the pages and listened back. Emily's careful tone, Robert's friendly exit, Mark's management voice, Sharon's bright blade, Martha's hand on my shoulder inside a wire. I rewound the part where she said almost everything I have and let it play twice. The old check stub from Ellen's hospital months lay under the notebook like a thin bone. I slid it half out so the date showed. It steadied me. This test is not anger, it is measurement. I woke before dawn and read the list again. I added times so tomorrow's mind could not doubt today's ear. Emily, 9:13 a.m. Robert, 10:02 a.m. Mark, 10:47 a.m. Sharon, 1:11 p.m. Martha, 3:06 p.m. I added their exact phrases to a second column because precision matters. We will see. You will figure it out. Cannot cover 7. Sell the house. I will help today. I noted the breaths, the laughs, the clinks, the silences, the small sounds that tell you who a person is when money enters a room. By noon, I had enough to stop. The experiment does not ask for volume. It asks for pattern. The pattern was clear. When love had an amount and a date, 4 people stepped backward and 1 stepped forward with a pocket she could barely open. I slid the recorder into its case and shut the notebook. Grief stood up and left the room without slamming a door. I washed my cup and watched the water spiral. In the glass, my face looked older and less tired. Walter called around dinner and asked for the short version. I gave it to him in 5 lines. He was quiet, then said, "Good. Good hurts because it is clean. You have what you need. Now stop calling for a while. Make your next moves from evidence, not ache." I wrote that at the bottom of the page and circled it. Evidence, not ache. Evening settled like a book put down with a finger holding the place. I stacked the notebook on the withdrawal slip and set the recorder on top. I walked the rooms once and turned off the lights. Before I slept, I stood at the window and said the words so my mind would hear them while I dreamed. Silence protects. Proof anchors. I did not add a prayer. I did not need one. The truth was already in the house. Before bed, I reopened the notebook and drew a 3rd column labeled Tells. Beside each name, I wrote the small giveaways a jury might miss. but a father never does. Emily's breath catching when money enters the sentence. Robert's joke that arrives too fast. Mark's lecture tone rising when refusal hardens. Sharon's pleasure hiding behind advice. Martha's silence before yes, the kind that means a person is checking the cupboard and choosing you anyway. I underlined the column twice. Facts live in numbers, but character lives in patterns. And both were on the page. Keep both equally weighty. Tonight. I started with Emily because gentleness felt like the shallow end. The recorder's red light blinked, and I read the line I had written without apology. I made a bad investment. The bank is moving. I need $7,000 to hold the house. Can you help this week? Her voice arrived soft and bright, like a door opened only a few inches. Dad, that's awful. I'm so sorry. Let me talk to Paul and see what we can do. Tuition hit us, and we just covered a condo repair. Maybe a small amount next month. I wrote the time and the words, then left the rest blank. She added, I'll call you tomorrow, which usually means never. I thanked her, ended the call, and said the sentence into the mic so I would not forget the shape of it. We will see. Walter texted one sentence. Stop patting. I placed my palm on the table to steady the urge to explain myself and pressed the next number. Robert answered mid-laugh, as if I had interrupted a story he was telling about himself. Brother, what's good? I read the line again, without preface. He let out a low whistle, then a chuckle that slid into advice. That's rough. 7 grand. You sure you cannot refinance? Sell the truck. Trim some fat. You know the drill. I said the deadline again. This week. He grew friendly the way a man grows friendly when he wants to end a call. You'll figure it out. You always do. Not even a maybe. I wrote the time and the phrase, you will figure it out. Then I wrote 0. Mark's name sat under my thumb like a splinter. I pressed call and stepped to the window. He answered with startup air in his voice. Dad, I am walking into a meeting. Is this quick? It is quick. I made a bad investment. The bank is moving. I need $7,000 to hold the house. Can you help this week? He exhaled like a coach about to fix a player. Dad, you need a plan. At your age, you cannot gamble like that. I have payroll, a lease, a product launch. 7 is not realistic for me right now. Maybe 2 later. I repeated this week. He said I cannot cover 7 and added call me if it gets dire, as if the word dire were comfort. I wrote his exact phrases and the tone, then the small sound he made when he shifted the phone away. Sharon's number flashed like a porch light I never liked. She answered on ring 2 with a smile I could hear. Henry, what a surprise. I read the line. She let a beat pass long enough to warm the contempt. Well, isn't this something? 7,000. After all those years of you playing the helper, maybe it is time to be practical. Sell the house. Live within your means like the rest of us. I reminded her of the hurricane year and the check I wrote to repair their roof. She clicked her tongue. That was different. Besides, we all sacrificed. I wrote her words, then added one I could not write while she listened. Revision. By late afternoon, the page showed a pattern neat enough to trace with a finger. Soft promise. Deflection. Lecture. Contempt. The only number left on the short list that did not smell like a ledger was Martha's. I had avoided it because love does not need a test, and yet the test needs the whole truth. I pressed call, the recorder blinking. Henry, she said, and the room changed temperature. I spoke the line and hated how it sounded in her ear. She did not hesitate. Oh, sweetheart, I am so sorry. Of course I will help. I do not have 7, but I can bring 3 today. It is almost everything I have, but you need it more. I stared at the window until my eyes found water. Martha, I cannot take that from you. She made a small sound that quieted the decades. Family helps family. You told me that when you fixed my porch stairs. Do not argue. Tell me where to meet you. I wrote her words with my hand shaking and added a note the recorder could not capture. Immediate, yes. I set the phone on the table and let the silence stand between the calls like a wall. I read each entry aloud to the recorder so I would have the rhythm as well as the words. Then I turned the page and copied the list again, slower. Emily, we will see. Robert, you will figure it out. Mark, cannot cover 7. Sharon, sell the house. Martha, I will help today. The kettle hissed. I poured water over tea and watched steam rise. Grief sat down across from me, but it did not talk. It only looked at the list until Clarity took the other chair. Walter came by at dusk and found me lining up the notebook with the edge of the table. He scanned the columns without touching the paper. He pointed once at the dot next to later. Do not wait for promises with no date, he said. Let the call end where the sentence ends. I nodded. He tapped the recorder with a knuckle. Keep proof for your sanity. One day they will say they offered, they tried, they meant to. You will need their exact words more than you need your memory of the feeling. Then he added the sentence I wrote twice. Stop apologizing. Night pressed against the windows. I sat with the pages and listened back. Emily's careful tone, Robert's friendly exit, Mark's management voice, Sharon's bright blade, Martha's hand on my shoulder inside a wire. I rewound the part where she said almost everything I have and let it play twice. The old check stub from Ellen's hospital months lay under the notebook like a thin bone. I slid it half out so the date showed. It steadied me. This test is not anger, it is measurement. I woke before dawn and read the list again. I added times so tomorrow's mind could not doubt today's ear. Emily, 9:13 a.m. Robert, 10:02 a.m. Mark, 10:47 a.m. Sharon, 1:11 p.m. Martha, 3:06 p.m. I added their exact phrases to a second column because precision matters. We will see. You will figure it out. Cannot cover 7. Sell the house. I will help today. I noted the breaths, the laughs, the clinks, the silences, the small sounds that tell you who a person is when money enters a room. By noon, I had enough to stop. The experiment does not ask for volume, it asks for pattern. The pattern was clear. When love had an amount and a date, 4 people stepped backward and 1 stepped forward with a pocket she could barely open. I slid the recorder into its case and shut the notebook. Grief stood up and left the room without slamming a door. I washed my cup and watched the water spiral. In the glass, my face looked older and less tired. Walter called around dinner and asked for the short version. I gave it to him in 5 lines. He was quiet, then said, "Good. Good hurts because it is clean. You have what you need. Now stop calling for a while. Make your next moves from evidence, not ache." I wrote that at the bottom of the page and circled it. Evidence, not ache. Evening settled like a book put down with a finger holding the place. I stacked the notebook on the withdrawal slip and set the recorder on top. I walked the rooms once and turned off the lights. Before I slept, I stood at the window and said the words so my mind would hear them while I dreamed. Silence protects. Proof anchors. I did not add a prayer. I did not need one. The truth was already in the house. Before bed, I reopened the notebook and drew a 3rd column labeled Tells. Beside each name, I wrote the small giveaways a jury might miss, but a father never does. Emily's breath catching when money enters the sentence. Robert's joke that arrives too fast. Mark's lecture tone rising when refusal hardens. Sharon's pleasure hiding behind advice. Martha's silence before, yes, the kind that means a person is checking the cupboard and choosing you anyway. I underlined the column twice. Facts live in numbers, but character lives in patterns, and both were on the page. Keep both. Equally weighty. Tonight. Henry rose with purpose that morning. The house, worn in the corners and softened by years of footsteps, would become a stage. If truth was to step into the light, the room needed to be ready. He walked slowly through the living room, straightening picture frames until the faces looked level with the present. He dusted the mantel where Ellen's photo sat, her smile forever younger than the man preparing now. He polished the coffee table until its surface shone, a mirror for what would unfold. The chairs were arranged in a loose circle, equal distance apart, no throne for anyone to claim. The recorder found its hiding place beneath the magazine stack on the side table. Its red eye blinked once before vanishing under paper. Henry tested it, coughing softly and replaying the sound, then setting it back into silence. He checked the clock on the mantel and adjusted the brass hands until they read true. He wanted no ambiguity when 6:00 arrived. Invitations had gone out in the plainest form, short phone calls with the same request. Come by at 6. We need to talk about the house. Each voice on the other end had carried its own interpretation. Robert sounded sure he would be signing papers. Mark answered like a man about to assume command. Emily hesitated, then agreed, her tone suggesting she would come only to witness, not to lead. Each believed Henry had wavered. Each believed he would bend toward them. Walter stopped by at noon, his presence a calm that steadied Henry's pacing. He walked the room once, looking at the arrangement, the table, the envelope Henry had left at the edge with Robert's contract inside. He nodded approval, then offered his final words of counsel. Let them talk. Let them show themselves. You just keep quiet and keep steady. The recorder will do the heavy lifting. Henry absorbed the advice like scripture. He had no interest in speeches. He wanted truth to fall out of their mouths and land where no one could deny it. The afternoon passed in small tasks that carried weight. He folded the throw blanket over the couch's arm, smoothed the rug so its corners held straight, and wiped the streak from the front window until the view of the street was sharp. He brewed a pot of coffee and let it sit, cooling in the pot, its bitter scent lingering as a background note. At 5, he laid out plain mugs, empty, untouched, a symbol of hospitality withheld. The stage was not for comfort. Thunder rumbled faintly on the horizon, a summer storm dragging its feet. The air inside held that charged stillness that makes even ordinary sounds distinct. A floorboard creaked under Henry's step as he crossed to the mantel clock, aligning it with the second hand of his wristwatch. 5:58. He stood still and breathed once, steady and slow, as though taking position before the curtain rises. At exactly 6, the latch on the front door lifted, and the old wood carried the sound across the room. Robert entered first, his stride brisk, his folder tucked like a weapon beneath his arm. He scanned the room, saw the contract envelope resting in plain sight, and gave a smile that assumed victory. Mark followed close behind, his jaw set, his coat still on his shoulders, his hand gripping the back of a chair as if he had already claimed it. Emily arrived last, softer, almost apologetic, eyes flicking from brother to uncle before landing on her father. She sat, lightly, as if ready to rise at any moment. Henry gestured to the chairs. Please, sit. His voice was calm, even, unhurried. He took his own seat last, folding his hands together in his lap. The clock on the mantel clicked into the hour, its sound filling the silence left by the guests' shifting postures. The coffee table between them gleamed under the lamp's yellow glow, its polished surface reflecting the envelope like a spotlight. The storm outside muttered again, thunder faint, but promising more. Inside, the air held a waiting tension, the kind of quiet that invites words to prove themselves. Henry looked at each face in turn, offering no hint of preference. Robert cleared his throat first, leaning forward with the assurance of a man convinced the matter was already decided. Mark sat back, but watched, coiled, ready to interrupt. Emily folded her hands in her lap, silent, prepared to absorb. The recorder beneath the magazines captured every shift, every breath. Henry sat still, the steady center of the room, The man who had spent decades keeping accounts and balancing columns, now balancing hearts in the same meticulous way. The stage was set, the actors in their places, and the truth, at last, would perform. Henry waited for the first voice to claim the room. Robert spoke first. He leaned over the coffee table, slapped his folder down, and slid out a page with numbers that insulted the roof and the years. "Cash today," he said, tapping the figure. "Clean and quick. Sign here, and you sleep tonight." Mark laughed under his breath. "Clean and quick," he echoed. "Clean for you. Dad, that offer is a joke. Give me the deed, keep it in the family, and I will handle the bank. You can stay for a while. I will take the pressure." Emily lifted both palms, her voice a soft ribbon trying to stitch the air. "Please stop. This is about safety. Dad needs stability. He needs a plan, not a tug of war. We can help if we breathe and slow down." Robert turned on her. "Help with what? Sympathy casseroles." He flicked the paper. "This is help. Real numbers. Real relief. The bank will not wait." Mark reached for the envelope at the edge of the table. Henry set 2 fingers on it and kept it still. Mark pulled back. "Dad, sign the transfer to me. You taught me to be decisive. This is decisive." Emily swallowed. "Or we sell and rent something small for a while, anywhere safe. No battles, just you resting." Voices overlapped. Robert recited numbers, promised speed, warned of foreclosure like a storm on the porch. Mark pitched control, his tone sharpening whenever Robert spoke. Emily kept saying safe, as if repeating it could conjure a harbor. The clock ticked. The storm grumbled beyond the houses. Henry kept his hands folded. Robert pushed the contract forward again. "I am not here to debate feelings. The bank is counting days. This gives him a path off the cliff. Henry, sign and I wire within the hour. That is more mercy than you will get anywhere else." "Mercy," Mark said, "your mercy would gut him. A transfer is smarter. We restructure, refinance, and no one sees a notice. He stays where he belongs." "I carry it." "Carry it," Robert snapped. "You mean own it. At least I am honest. I pay him. You take it and say thank you." Emily's fingers tightened. "This is tearing him apart. Dad, look at me. I want you safe. If that means moving in for a while, we make space. It will not be perfect, but it will be loving." Henry raised one hand. "Keep going. I am listening." That poured fuel. Robert outlined payment and possession. Mark countered with schedules, promising to file forms before sunrise. Emily tried to fold both proposals into a blanket and tuck it around the man in the chair. The noise swelled and thinned. Henry let it crest, then tapped the table. He reached to the side table, slid a small object from under the magazines, and set it in the open. The recorder caught the lamplight. The red light blinked, then went still as he pressed. "Stop. This house is a mirror," Henry said. He did not raise his voice. "Tonight you have been looking into it. Every word is recorded." Silence took the room. Mark's mouth closed on whatever argument had been building. Robert's fingers withdrew from the contract. Emily's gaze fell to the recorder, then lifted with something like shame and something like relief. Henry slid the recorder to the center. "The folder can go back in your briefcase," he said to Robert. "The deed can stay where it is," he said to Mark. "Emily, thank you for the word safety. I will be safe because I will keep the only thing that was ever mine to keep. My choice." Robert found his voice. "You set us up. A setup." He jabbed at the recorder. "You want to paint us as thieves." "I wanted to see," Henry said. "When people think you are losing, they tell the truth about what they want. When people think they can take, they tell the truth twice. I asked each of you for help, $7,000 to hold the house. You remember what you said. I do too, and now I know." Mark leaned forward, slower now. "Dad, you are scared. Let me fix it quietly. We will pretend this recorder never existed." We are family. Emily's voice barely carried. Dad, I am sorry. I should have shown up sooner. I should have said yes. I am here now. Tell me what you need. What I need is simple, Henry said. I will not sign anything tonight. I will not sign anything tomorrow. This house is not your prize. It is my mirror. Money does not change people. It shows them. And what it showed tonight will not be forgotten. Robert stood so fast the chair scraped. You think a toy makes you righteous. Keep your house. See how long the bank lets you pretend. He snatched the contract, stuffed it into his folder, and pointed at Mark. Good luck carrying the old man when the notices stack up. He jabbed a thumb toward Emily. And you, keep your pity. He headed for the door. Mark did not rise at first. He stared at Henry with a simmering heat that belonged to teenage arguments. You have no idea what you are doing, he said quietly. Pride will make you homeless. Call me when the first truck shows up. He stood and left without looking back. The house settled into the quiet they left behind. Emily remained, tears bright but held. Dad, she whispered, I am sorry. I should have brought help instead of advice. I cannot fix what I already said, but I can listen now. Please let me try. Henry saw the daughter who still paused before she spoke when it mattered. He nodded once. Thank you for saying it out loud. Tonight is over. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow is not for decisions. It is for air. She touched his shoulder and left with a soft click. The thunder moved farther off. Henry sat still, the recorder between his hands. The room smelled faintly of lemon oil. The clock kept time. He rewound and listened to the last words he had spoken. Money does not change people. It shows them. The sentence settled. He pressed stop and slid the device back under the magazines. He looked out at the street, empty except for the glisten left by the storm. A porch light blinked on. Somewhere a dog barked, then settled. He touched the frame of Ellen's photo. He had not raised his voice. He had not begged. He had not signed. He had held a mirror and watched the truth step forward. He turned off the lamp. The room fell into darkness. In the hallway, his footsteps made the familiar creak. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed. He poured a glass of water and returned it to the sink. Then he said, into the dark, enough. The night would be long, but lighter. Tomorrow would bring calls, anger, and sweetened offers. He would let them roll past like rain off a roof. Tonight had been for proof, and proof, at last, was home. Proof was finally home. The storm rolled in with the same quiet force Henry had been waiting for. Rain lashed the siding and rattled against the window panes, the sound filling the silence inside the house. He had cleaned again, though there was little left to polish. The living room was stripped of the papers, stripped of the folder Robert had left behind, stripped of the false contracts and arguments. Only one item remained, set deliberately on the mantel above the fireplace. A plain envelope, nothing written on the front. Its weight was small, but it carried the night in its grip. At 8 sharp, the knock came. Henry opened the door to find Mark, his jaw tight, his coat damp from the rain. Robert followed, umbrella dripping, folder conspicuously absent this time. Emily trailed behind them, her hair plastered to her forehead, her eyes soft but wary. The three of them stepped inside, their gazes traveling almost instantly to the mantel. They saw the envelope, and though none spoke of it yet, Henry caught the flicker in their eyes. He gestured to the chairs. Sit. This will not take long. They settled reluctantly. The clock on the wall ticked steady, almost matching the patter of the rain outside. Henry remained standing. His hands rested lightly on the back of the armchair where Ellen had once sat during holidays, her laughter rising above the chatter. He drew a breath, slow and deliberate. Last night, he said, you fought over a house. You fought over who would hold the deed, who would claim the walls. who would measure value in wood and nails. Tonight, you will see what it was never about. Mark leaned forward. His eyes darted to the envelope again. Dad, what's in there? Henry picked it up, held it in one hand, and let the paper bend under his grip. 3 weeks ago, he said, I held 6 blinking numbers in my hand. Numbers that changed everything. $62 million. The silence broke like glass. Mark blinked, his face unreadable at first. Robert's mouth opened, then closed again. Emily covered hers with both hands, a sharp breath escaping. Henry continued. After taxes, it came to just under 40. Every cent has been secured through a blind trust with my attorney. Not $1 touched, not one person told. Until now. The rain hissed harder against the windows, a steady percussion to the words. Mark spoke first. His voice trembled but quickly steadied into something polished. Dad, listen to me. This is big, bigger than anything you have ever handled. You need someone who knows how to manage it, who understands investments and planning. Let me help. Let me set up accounts, portfolios. I can make sure it grows, not shrinks. You can trust me. Robert barked a laugh, loud, bitter. Trust you. He looked at Henry. You know better than that. I've been in business my whole life. Deals, contracts, returns. You put this money in my hands and I can double it in 5 years. You will live better than kings. And your kids, your grandkids, they will never want. Let me invest it. That's the smart play. Emily's voice slipped between theirs, quieter, almost trembling. Dad, stop. Stop listening to them. You don't have to hand this to anyone. You should use it for yourself. Travel, fix this house, finally live the way you deserve. Her eyes glistened, but even as she spoke, her voice wavered. Logistics crept in. We can help with taxes, with setting up healthcare, with making sure you don't get taken advantage of. It's a lot for one man. Let us ease the burden. Henry listened to each voice. He let the arguments rise, overlap, echo against the old plaster walls. He set the envelope down again on the mantel, its edge flush against the frame of Ellen's photo. The picture showed her smiling, head tilted, as if amused by some long-ago joke. He drew a long breath. When I had nothing, he said slowly, you showed me who you were. Mark, you laughed and told me to plan better. Emily, you sympathized and pushed it into a future that never came. Robert, you told me to refinance, sell what little I had left. And Martha, his voice cracked for the first time. Martha, with her pension smaller than your car payments, offered me $3,000 without a pause. The three shifted uncomfortably. Henry pressed on. And now, when I reveal everything, you show me again. Mark, you lunge with management. Robert, you lunge with schemes. Emily, you reach for control disguised as care. He moved to the table, placed both palms flat against it. You failed both tests. When I had nothing, you vanished. When I had everything, you lunged. Not one of you saw me. Not one of you asked what I wanted. You only asked what you could take, what you could turn, what you could hold. Mark's face reddened. Dad, that's not fair. We didn't know. You blindsided us. Robert's voice sharpened. You sit here judging, but money changes everything. This isn't about family anymore. This is about survival, about opportunity. Emily's tears broke free. I tried, Dad. I did. I was afraid. I wanted you safe. Henry raised his voice just enough to cut through them. Money doesn't change people. It shows them. The thunder rolled, a deep rumble that shook the glass in the frames. Henry's words hung there, heavier than the storm. He reached for the envelope one last time, held it steady in his hand, then slid it into the drawer of the side table and closed it with a sharp click. You will receive nothing, he said. Not from this house, not from this fortune, not from me. The sentence landed like a verdict. The rain filled the silence, hissing against the world beyond the walls. Robert surged to his feet, his face twisted in anger. "This is insane. You're going to waste it. Give it away to strangers." Mark rose more slowly, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. "You'll regret this, Dad. You'll regret cutting out your own son." Emily stood last, her tears streaking down her cheeks. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." Henry turned his gaze to the photograph of Ellen, her smile eternal in the frame. He felt her presence steady him, anchor him. His voice dropped into something firm, unshakable. "This is not punishment. This is protection. This is peace." He moved to the door, opened it wide. The storm spilled in with the cold air, the hiss of rain louder now. "Go." Robert stormed past him, muttering curses under his breath. Mark followed, his glare lingering but his silence louder than his words. Emily paused, her shoulders shaking, her lips parting as if to plead again. But she saw his eyes, steady, resolved. She lowered her gaze and stepped into the storm. Henry closed the door behind them, turned the lock, and leaned against it for a long breath. The room was still again, except for the rain on the windows and the slow tick of the clock. He walked back to the mantel, touched Ellen's photo, and whispered, "They saw the mirror. And now it's over." The thunder rolled once more, a final note to the night's verdict. 10. If this moment shook you, take a second to hit like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments who stood by you when there was nothing to gain, when all you had was need, not wealth. Your stories matter. They remind someone watching right now that boundaries protect dignity, and that true loyalty never asks for leverage. Henry Lawson walked into Linda Myers's office one final time with a folder under his arm. This time, the papers weren't props. They were the blueprint for the life he wanted to build after silence had shown him truth. Linda adjusted her glasses and waited as he laid the folder across her desk. Inside were the drafts she had been refining for weeks. Trusts that would lock away every dollar, instructions that left no ambiguity, and clauses so clear that even the most determined relative could not twist them. She looked up at him with quiet respect. "Mr. Lawson, once these are signed, it's done. They won't touch a dime." Henry nodded. "That's the point. I'm not punishing them, Linda. I'm protecting what's left of me. They had their chance to show love when love cost them something. Now the money has a different purpose." She slid the signature page forward. His pen moved steadily, every stroke closing a door on the past. With one final line, the estate was airtight. Mark, Emily, Robert, all excluded. No loopholes, no bargaining chips. For the first time, Henry felt the weight of their demands lift cleanly off his shoulders. When he walked out of that office, the plan wasn't about revenge. It was about direction. Ellen's name, once whispered in a hospital hallway as bills stacked higher than medicine could cover, would now be etched into something permanent. The Ellen Lawson Scholarship. Funds dedicated to first-generation teachers, young men and women who believed in shaping lives the way she had shaped his. Henry pictured a small-town student standing at a podium one day, their future brighter because Ellen's name opened a door. That thought steadied him more than any glass of bourbon ever could. But there was more than scholarships. He remembered the hospital corridors, the fluorescent buzz, the way he had counted every bill in his hand while asking doctors to wait one more week. He thought of families still pacing those halls tonight. With Linda's help, he directed part of the trust toward a community clinic wing, a space where treatments would be given without bargaining, without shame, where the word care meant what it was supposed to mean. Then came the small grants fund, not large enough to make headlines, but large enough to matter. He named it quietly, the Martha Fund, after the aunt who had slipped $200 into his palm when no one else had lifted a finger. Through this fund, dozens of small checks would one day arrive in quiet mailboxes, helping families pay rent, cover groceries, or buy medicine. None of them would know Henry Lawson by name, but they would know that someone believed in their dignity. Linda tapped her pen thoughtfully. Do you want them to know about these gifts, or do you want anonymity? Anonymity, Henry said without hesitation. This isn't about recognition. It's about ending the cycle. I won't let money be a leash anymore. There was still one personal matter. Martha, the woman who had given from her poverty with no hesitation. Henry wanted to make sure she never felt exposed, never felt that she had to repay him. Through the trust, he arranged for her medical expenses to be covered quietly, her mortgage paid month after month through a trustee she would never meet. She would never be burdened with the feeling of debt. She would simply be free, as she had once tried to free him with her trembling generosity. That night, Henry sat at his kitchen table again. The candle burned low, and his leather notebook lay open before him. On its pages were the words he had scribbled during weeks of calls, deflections, refusals, judgments, and at the end, one line that stood apart. Martha gave almost all she had, no hesitation. He placed his hand over those words and whispered, "This is where the story turns." The next day, Walter met him at the bank. The retired cop who had seen too much deceit in his own years now stood as Henry's informal guardian. They walked into the safe deposit vault together, the air cool and sterile. Inside, Henry slid a thick envelope across to Walter. "What's this?" Walter asked, his voice low. "The records," Henry said, "every tape, every note, every signature. Not for revenge, not for exposure, just proof. If one day I falter, if guilt starts whispering, I need someone to hand me back the truth." Walter nodded slowly, sliding the envelope into the box. "It's safe now. You're safe now." Henry exhaled. For the first time, the silence in his house no longer felt hollow. It felt earned. Over the following weeks, he lived simply, just as he always had. The peeling paint still curled at the edges of his modest house. The clock on the wall still ticked, and the coffee still brewed strong and black each morning. But beneath the ordinariness was a plan so carefully constructed that no storm could rattle it. The neighbors didn't know, nor did the children who passed by on bicycles, nor the relatives who still left empty voicemails. And that was exactly how Henry wanted it. One evening, sitting on the porch, Walter asked him the question that hung in the air like a challenge. "Do you feel lighter?" Henry thought for a long time before answering. "Not lighter," he said slowly. "Clearer. For the first time, I can see where leverage ends and clarity begins." That became his credo. Not a vengeful oath, not a bitter scar, but a compass line he would follow for the rest of his days. In his kitchen drawer, beneath the folded towels, the original lottery ticket still rested in a plain envelope. It was no longer a secret burning his pocket. It was a reminder of a turning point. The night when silence became an ally and proof became an anchor. And while his children and his brother circled elsewhere, unaware of the legacies forming in their absence, Henry sat with his memories of Ellen, of Martha, of laughter that once filled his home. He knew those names, those voices, would carry forward long after the others had faded into the static of unanswered calls. Justice had not come with a gavel or a headline. It had come with a pen, a trust, and a quiet line written into his notebook. Leverage ends where clarity begins. 12. The weeks that followed carried no fireworks, no grand purchases, no dramatic unveilings. Henry Lawson chose a quieter path, one built with his own hands. On a crisp morning, he stepped out onto the porch with a small toolbox. The rail that had leaned for years was finally given attention. He sanded the edges, tightened the screws, and brushed on a fresh coat of paint. With every stroke, he felt something else settle inside him. Not victory, not vengeance, simply steadiness. the kind he had missed for far too long. The garden Ellen had once loved stood weary and overgrown. Henry pulled on gloves and set to work, kneeling on the soil where her laughter still seemed to linger. He planted rows of marigolds, tomatoes, and climbing beans. His hands ached at the end of each day, but the ache felt earned. By midsummer, colors bloomed and neighbors paused to compliment the yard. Henry smiled and nodded, knowing Ellen would have been proud to see it alive again. On Sundays, Henry returned to the diner down the road, slipping into the same booth he and Ellen had shared for decades. The waitress recognized him instantly, poured his coffee strong, and left the sugar caddy at the corner of the table. Over time, he became part of the rhythm again. A nod to the mailman, a wave to the mechanic, a quiet word with the pastor who stopped in for pie. No one asked about fortunes or scandals. They asked about the weather, the tomatoes, the score from Friday's game. In those simple exchanges, Henry felt himself stitched back into the fabric of community. He bought nothing flashy. No new car, no big house, no indulgent displays. His purchases were measured in time and in health. A new pair of walking shoes to ease his knees on long paths. A library card that stamped new dates on old habits. The ink pressing fresh starts into the paper. A membership at the small gym where seniors stretched and biked, slowly but steadily, where the laughter came easier than the miles. The phone still rang sometimes, numbers he recognized but chose not to answer. Mark left messages about sorting things out. Emily spoke softly, asking for a chance to explain. Robert tried once, voice tight with irritation, before the line cut short. Henry saved none of them. Silence had become its own kind of shield. Instead, he wrote, each child received one letter. The tone was calm, factual, steady. No insults, no accusations. He described what had been asked, what had been answered, and what he had seen with his own eyes. He made no demands, set no traps. He ended each letter with the same simple line, I wish you peace, and I will protect my peace, as. Well, then he sealed the envelopes and placed them in the mailbox, letting silence do the rest of the work. Some nights, Henry sat at the kitchen table, listening to the distant church bell marking the hour. He thought of Ellen, of Martha, of the way their small acts of kindness had carried more weight than fortunes. He thought of the garden waiting for morning sun, of the porch rail solid beneath his hand, of the simple fact that he had endured. The birds came early, as they always had, filling the air with the ordinary music of dawn. Henry rose, made coffee, and opened the back door to greet them. Life had not turned grand. It had turned honest. In that honesty, Henry found healing. Not the kind that erased scars, but the kind that let him live with them. Every nail driven, every seed planted, every unanswered call became part of the same lesson. Peace is not given, it is built. And Henry Lawson had finally built his. The season turned warm again, and with it Henry decided to do something small but meaningful. He cleared the backyard, mowed the grass, and borrowed a few strings of lights from the church storage room. By the time evening came, the yard glowed softly with a gentle amber shimmer. A folding table stood in the center, draped not with linen, but with the same checkered cloth Ellen had used for picnics. On it were plates of potato salad, roasted chicken, fresh bread, and a pie bought from the diner. Nothing extravagant, nothing meant to impress. Only food meant to be shared. Walter arrived first, carrying a bottle of iced tea. Behind him came two neighbors from down the street, Mrs. Alvarez and her grandson, who helped set out extra chairs. Another neighbor brought a basket of green beans from her garden. Soon the table filled, not with wealth, but with kindness. Henry looked around and felt a warmth he had not felt in years. These were not people waiting to see what they could take. These were people showing up because they wanted to. At the head of the table, Henry placed two items. A framed thank you card from Aunt Martha, written in her shaky hand, sat beside a photo of Ellen in her garden, smiling in her wide straw hat. The card read simply, "Family helps family. Thank you." Henry had kept it near his bed for months. Tonight, it belonged here, in the open, as a reminder of the people who chose to give when giving was hard. As the meal began, laughter drifted across the yard. Walter told a story from his years on the force. Mrs. Alvarez shared a memory of Ellen's cooking, and the boy recited a joke he had been practicing all week. The sounds of forks against plates, of voices carrying through the evening, replaced the silence that had haunted Henry's house for too long. When the plates were half empty and the sun sank low, Henry cleared his throat. The table quieted, eyes turning to him. He did not raise his glass or stand dramatically. He simply spoke in his even, steady voice. "Love shows up," he said. "Respect is a verb, and when truth knocks, I open the door." The words hung in the summer air, simple but undeniable. Walter nodded. Mrs. Alvarez reached for Henry's hand, squeezing it gently. The boy, too young to fully understand, repeated the line softly under his breath, as though committing it to memory. Henry leaned back in his chair, watching the lights sway slightly in the breeze. He felt no anger, no gloating, no ache to revisit what had been lost. His heart carried the truth that mattered. Family is not blood alone. Family is presence, action, and care. The ones who sit with you in hard times are the ones who deserve to sit with you in good times. As night deepened, the group lingered. They spoke of gardens, of local news, of plans for the coming fall. There were no questions about inheritances, no hidden agendas, just the ease of neighbors who had become friends. Henry found himself smiling more than he expected, the lines in his face softened by the glow of lanterns and the company of people who asked for nothing but his time. When the evening wound down and the last chair was folded away, Henry stepped back into his kitchen. On the counter sat his leather notebook, edges worn from weeks of recording every word, every test, every proof. Beside it lay a photocopy of the winning lottery ticket, the numbers still clear beneath the lamplight. He placed his hand on both, then closed the notebook gently. Both were true. Both were past. What mattered was what came after. He carried the notebook to the small desk in the corner and set it beside a stack of bills already paid, his new library card, and a seed packet waiting for planting. These, he thought, were the anchors of the life he wanted to live. Proof had been gathered, truth had been spoken, and now dignity would carry the rest. Outside, the laughter still echoed faintly, fading into the hum of summer insects. A soft wind stirred the trees, rustling leaves against one another like quiet applause. Henry took one last look at the lights strung across the yard, at Ellen's photograph, smiling from the table, and at the card that had said what he now knew by heart: "Family helps family." With that, Henry turned off the lamp, letting the house rest. The night was cool, steady, and full of peace. If this story gave you even a moment of clarity, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and share where you are watching from. Your comments and your stories matter here, because someone else out there may be standing at the same crossroad Henry faced. Have you ever chosen truth over comfort, even when it cost you? What boundary did you set that finally protected your peace? When you tell that story in the comments, you are not just speaking into the air. You are giving someone else permission to act with dignity. That ripple of honesty may be what keeps another person from collapsing under silence. And we are not done yet. Next, we are bringing you a holiday story where an inheritance dinner becomes an honesty test, and the quietest person at the table turns out to hold the sharpest truth. Tap the box when it appears, and share this with someone who needs it.